Lyric, where have you been?
Marini. To not leave early.
Oh. All right, so we're on our last day of vectors. And I promise today is so much easier than last time. Because we're just gonna go over the other form of a vector and then really not much is new, okay? So take a look at the top. Vectors can only be multiplied with, what do I call a number in the front if it's vectors? It starts with the S. Scalar. They can only multiply with scalars, which remember, that's just a regular number. Okay, but then you can only add vectors with other vectors. So they can be multiplied with numbers, but added only with other vectors. Okay, which brings us to problems like number 1, where you have a little bit of both. Okay, what do you think you should do first if one of your vectors has a number on the outside? Distribute first. And the reason why is, remember PEMDAS? Okay, we're gonna multiply into the vector first and then add second. So we're not gonna do all 3 of these. Let's do letter B. So my first vector is 5, 2. There is no number in the front, so I'm gonna keep that one the same. So it'll still be 5, 2. But then for my 1/2 scalar, I'm gonna apply that first. So I'll do a half of 20, what would that be? 10, and then a half on -8, what would that be? And then from there, we're gonna add. How do I add vectors? X to X, Y to Y, very good. So if I have a 5 and a 10, how many altogether? 15. And then if I do my 2 and my -4, how many is that? -2, very good. Okay, let's take a look at letter C when you're ready. Okay, the only difference from B to C is what is the sign in the middle on problem C? To subtraction, I want you to just think of that then as a -2. So my 3, 2 in the front is gonna stay the same. Okay, because I don't have anything to distribute there. Bless you. But then what's -2 times 5? -10. And then remember, when you distribute, you have to apply it to both numbers. What's the -2 on the 8? -16. Now from here, be careful on this. Because you brought the negative into the vector, now it's just a plus in the middle. Okay, it's not still a subtraction because you brought the subtraction into the vector. So from there, what's 3 and -10? What about 2 and -16? Very good. You can do it? Okay, perfect. All right, now there's one other sort of thing that you might see on like your semester exam that the district makes. Or maybe in calculus. One day when you take this, there are 2 types of vectors. The one with the little pointy brackets, that's called component form. So you're gonna have the horizontal and the vertical change. Okay, this is to me the one that kind of makes the most sense, but there's also another form where you're gonna use I and J. Okay, so look right here at what it looks like. You don't use pointy brackets. But your A is still your horizontal change, your B is still your vertical change, but you're gonna denote them with an I or a J. Okay, so it's kind of silly that we even have a second version, but let me show you how easy it is. If your vector is -3, 4, to show that -3 is the X, you're gonna put a -3 I. And then what's my vertical change number? And what does the B get? A vector J, so it would be plus 4J. Now, if the 4 happened to be negative, instead of an add 4J, you'd put a minus 4J. But other than that, it's pretty much the same. Okay, so now let's take a look at vector W. 6, 2. What would I write to put it in standard form, which is what this is called? 6I, because that's the horizontal, plus 2J. And if the 2 is a negative number, I'd put a subtraction instead of a plus. Okay, now let's do a couple of problems looking like that. So take a look at number 2. It tells me that U is 3i plus 2j. V is negative I plus 6j. And I want to do 2u plus 5v. Here's how I'm going to do it. 2u, I'm going to put 2 blank plus. And then 5v is going to be 5 blank. And then in the blanks, I'm going to drop what each of my vectors were. So my vector u was what?
3i plus 2j.
Okay, 3i plus 2j. And notice that I'm using parentheses around that because when I multiply a vector by a scalar, I have to multiply it into both components. Okay, then same thing for my 5v. I'm going to put my negative I plus 6j. But notice that because I'm in the standard vector form, okay, I'm not using the pointy brackets, I'm just using like a regular parentheses. Okay, then we're going to take that 2 times it in. What should my front thing say? 6i plus 4j. For my second vector, I have 5 times a negative I. What would that be now? Negative 5i plus, and then 5 times 6 would be 30j. Very good. Okay, then from here, now it just looks like algebra that you can only combine like terms, but guess what the like terms are? They're the 2 i's. And then you can only put like terms together, so guess what else you can put together? The 2 j's. So this is just a more algebraic version of vectors, but it's the same thing. So my 6i and my minus 5i give me 1i left over. If you want to put the 1, you can, but you don't have to. And then my 4j plus my 30j gives me 34j. If you were asked to write that as a component vector, which is the x comma y version, what would it be? 1 comma 34. Okay, so those are the exact same thing. Okay, this is a standard unit vector. And this one is component vector. Okay, but pretty much you do everything the same. It's just, are you giving it the pointy brackets x, y, or are you giving it I, j? All right, go ahead and set up number 3 right next to it, please. So I want u minus 2v. So I'm gonna put blank minus 2 blank. Vector u is 4i plus j. Minus 2v is gonna be 3i minus 2j. Which vector do I have to put parentheses around, first or second? Second. Why don't I have to put them on the first? There's no number in the front. What do we call that number? Starts with an S?
Scalar.
No scalar in front means you don't have to put parentheses, but if you want to, you can. So this one's gonna stay the same, 4i plus j. And then what am I distributing into the second parentheses? What kind of 2? Make sure you bring the negative in with it. So it's negative 2 times 3i. What does that give me? Negative 6i. And then negative 2 times negative 2j gives me plus 4j. Very good. Then from there, you're combining like terms algebraically. I's go together. That gives me how many if it's 4 take away 6? Negative 2i. And then for my j's, I have a plus j and a plus 4j. How many does this one count as? Okay, this one is a 1, then plus 4 is 5, yes. Okay, if I asked you to write that as a component vector, what would the coordinates be? -2, 5. Very good. Okay. So just watch out for on your practice, when you do your delta math, if it says in terms of I and J, you're doing this one. If it says, component vector, you're doing this. Okay, turn the page, almost done. You'll notice when you turn the page that I messed up the graphs because apparently I don't know how to use a computer. So we're gonna just draw our own axis, okay, so that you can actually graph these. So for number 9, okay, I'm gonna pretend this is in here and just kind of move it over a little bit, okay? It'll be here. Okay, and then ignore, pretend none of this. is here. Okay. So they asked me to consider the vector 3, -5. Okay, well then I can grid that. I'm gonna go 3 which way if it's 3i
Right,
to the right and then
down.
down 5. So I'm gonna go to the right, 1, 2, 3, down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's my vector. Okay. Then it asks me after I grid it, which I just did, so plot the vector, check. It says to write the components of the vector. Well, then remember, that's just 3, -5. It asked me to find the magnitude. I erased it off the board earlier, but do you remember the formula for magnitude?
A squared plus B squared.
A squared plus B squared, and then take the square root. Do I care about any negatives in the vector? No. So it'd be 3 squared plus 5 squared, then take the square root. In your calculator, can you tell me 3 squared plus 5 squared? It should be a whole number. 3 squared plus 5 squared is gonna be 34. Oops, I put it next to 3 squared plus 5 squared, and then your answer would be root 34. Okay? Now, if you wanted to know exactly how much that is, you can take the square root of 34, it comes out to 5.8. Okay, but for most of your questions, you're gonna be using the square root button. Okay? Then it asks me for direction. How do I find direction of the vector? Okay, so tan -1, we're gonna call that inverse tan. And then what order do I put the x and the y?
One.
Y over x. So in this case, I'm finding the inverse tan of what? 5/3, we don't care about the negative. So in your calculator, find inverse tan or second tan, 5/3. You can use the pretty fraction if you want to, but you don't have to. Comes out to 59 degrees. That is called the reference angle. Reference angle. Okay, but it's not direction until you do what?
Do the 180.
180 plus or minus or 360 minus based on where the vector is. What quadrant is my vector in? What's the formula for 4?
360 minus 80.
Very good. So I'm gonna put up here a little mini version. So it's original theta, 180 minus theta, 180 plus theta, 360 minus theta. So because we're in quadrant 3 here, we're using, I'm sorry, I said that wrong, quadrant 4. We would do 360 minus 59, which comes out to what?
301.
301, very good. Okay. So remember, the first answer you get to the reference angle, but you're not finished until you do the final direction. Okay, 2 more, we're almost done. The last 2, did they give you vectors? Okay, how do I know that 9, 6 is not a vector?
Cause it's in parentheses, that's the curve.
Yeah, look at your endpoints. Okay, it does have numbers in it, but those are parentheses. Those are not brackets. Also, it says it's a point, right? So I want you to kind of fix your graph so that we have axes in the middle. So I'm gonna put mine here again. And then here again. Doesn't have to be perfect, just your best. Okay, and instead of actually giving you the vector, they tell you the initial point and the terminal point. So I want you to grid these on your paper. So 9, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then 2, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Now, initial point is where your vector should start. So the initial was 9, 6. And then it says the terminal point is 2, 4. That tells you the direction that this vector has to point. I can't just pick. So if I want to start at the initial point and connect to the terminal point, then I need to trace it this way. So I'm starting at the initial, I'm tracing back to the terminal, and then once I draw that arrow, I can count its components. So on your paper, will you count what's my X or my horizontal component? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then down 1, 2. So my vector would be -7, -2. Then it asks you to regraph it centered at the origin. I don't know if you remember on your homework, you would click and slide it. The only purpose of that is to find out what quadrant this should be in. Because right now, what quadrant is this in? In 1, but that's not where it would point if it was centered at the origin. If it started here and I went to the left 7 and down 2, what quadrant would I be pointing at? 3. So I'm gonna put here quad 3. That's really the only reason that you have to regraph it, is to know what quadrant it's in. Okay, then from there, you're finding the magnitude and the direction. Let's run through that quickly. Hopefully you remember how to do it. For direction, it's a squared plus b squared square root. What is my formula going to be with numbers in it? 7 squared plus 2 squared, then square root. That would be 49 plus 4, how many?
53.
53. Root 53 is good enough for your homework, but if you want to find what that is as a decimal, you could. Okay, then direction, we're doing inverse tan of y over x, which would be what numbers here? 2 over 7. Okay, round to the whole number on this. So I got 15.9, what are we rounding that to? Is that final answer? No, what quadrant are we in? Quad 3 means we're doing 180 plus or minus plus 16. What's my final direction?
196.
196. Okay, and then just real quick, let me remind you of what that means. In your triangle right here, if I were to connect this, just the central angle of the triangle is 16. But then remember, the reason that that doesn't count as the direction is because you have to start from where? For direction. Where do we have to start direction from? Remember over here, remember the positive x-axis, and we have to go the long way around. So that's why it comes out to 196, is you'll go to 180 plus 16 more. Do we remember that? Okay. Last one, 11. Will you just graph the vector and see if you can write it as a component vector? So your initial point is 4, -7. Your terminal point is 0, -2. Okay, which way should I make my arrow point? Starting where? Yes, the initial was 4, -7, and I have to connect to 0, -2. Also, remember, this is called the head. This is called the tail. Okay, so from there, what would be the components of that vector? Just count out the X and the Y, starting here and ending here. 1, 2, 3, 4 is correct.
5.
And then up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is correct. Yeah. Okay, and then from there, do you feel like you could follow the remaining steps? You would recenter it. What quadrant would that end up being?
2.
In 2, even though it's drawn in 4, that's because it's not centered. Okay, I feel like you could finish that pretty easily, right? Okay. All right, go ahead and pull out your delta map.
What's your intention?
What is it?
Oh, the 6 that I don't really sure.
It's because I messed up. I don't like.
Practice is great.
It says negative.
Uh-huh,
This is-
because we're starting here and we're counting.
What?
You have to start at the tail and count to the head. So we're going to the left, 1,
Why don't you
2,
turn
3,
it up?
4.
Actually, I
And
like
then
the
we're
height.
going up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, what are you counting, the boxes or the
Uh-huh,
lines?
the boxes.
You actually messed up one.
Uh-huh. What I think about more is think about jumps. So you're jumping 1, 2.
So go to, go to.
Do y'all need paper over here? Yes, please.
That's pretty cool.
Can you pass that to? Anybody else paper? I mean.
We actually regretted it. I just want to know, what I'm saying last.
Do you guys like some paper?
Oh, we're in practice. I like it. That's so sad.
Do you guys need paper over here?
It was a good, it was pretty easy.
Yeah. Any of y'all need paper? That you wanted?
I'm going to.
What is this? We're gonna get.
Y'all, in about 2 minutes, we're gonna work through number 4. So finish up the one you're working on and we'll do 4A all the way through the end.
Okay, girl.
That way we can finish it before lunch.
Miss, why does it have 2U plus V? I don't understand.
So do 2 blank plus blank. And then in the first blank, you're gonna put the U vector. You said it was 2U plus V, right? So what's the U vector?
-1. Coming.
Okay, plus.
I'm not really sure. Keep the research.
I got it.
And then you're gonna times the 2 in first. Wasn't it 2U?
Bro, that's your.
Yeah, 2U plus V.
So then why is there 2 behind it? You can't be out here. And then you should have a plus in the middle. Good, now times the 2 in. Then you have to exit that.
I never think you should have my life.
Oh my, yeah.
Well, then you want to start from 4 to 2. And then connect to 8. Yeah.
I think you're right.
U plus 2, 5 plus 2 times -6. -7. 2 times -6. It's your Y, that's wrong. Where's your work?
It's just like, I just like.
Yeah, what do you got?
Oh, okay. So you have, it's B plus 2u.
It's literally blue.
So it'd be negative plus
It's
negative.
Corey said it's white.
It's blue, because 2 times -3 is.
Well, I thought,
Or -6 something.
But like blue
oh,
or-
oh, yeah, I thought, so it'd be, so -9?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, you did, that's 2u is -6 1. We're not gonna have 3 is -1 2. I don't want to say -2, because oh, yeah, that should be not. Because you do it 3 times.
Hey, don't be.
Three, -3 times -9 is 9. I say, and then 9 and -5.
You seen it? Seen it, stop. Fast. Stop, seen it, eat it.
All right. We were just gonna do all of number 4.
Okay.
All right, go into 4A, please. 4A.
Punch it up right now.
Okay, real quick, we're just gonna run through all of the 4s because this is what we learned last class. So we'll do one together. I'll show you how to type it in, then you'll do all of number 5. Okay?
Okay.
So first question says, this is 4A. An airplane has a velocity of 300 miles per hour southeast. Then it says a 40-mile-per-hour wind is blowing north. We want to write the velocity of the plane. Okay, first question, this is 4A. How fast is the plane going?
Oh, God.
Okay, how fast is the plane?
300 miles per hour.
300 miles per hour. Okay, and I would recommend, guys, if you could, let's write this question down as we go through it so that after lunch you don't forget and then you don't remember how to do it. Okay, so for part A, how fast is the plane going? One more time. So it's 300 cosine something, 300 sine something. Okay. Then from there, I need to find my direction and it tells me that it's blowing which way? Read the plane. Southeast, so I'm gonna put that here. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna draw my little cardinal directions, north, south, east, west.
Never eat soggy waffles.
Never eat soggy waffles.
Never
Never
ever
ever smoke weed either way. Okay, and then from there, southeast, never ever. We gotta have that east in there.
Never
Okay.
ever smoke weed.
That would be southeast. Okay, let's label what degrees that would be. So east would be 360 all the way around or 0. And what would south be?
270.
So if I want to be right down the middle of 360 and 270, what would that be for perfectly southeast? 350.
I have not had no energy drink, stop.
Okay, now type it in.
Oh, this is me, but y'all not be acting like this. That's all there is, nothing to. Guys.
No, just actually, hold on, let's read the instructions.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, it says, we want to write it in component form, but we want to put a comma in the middle and we want the exact value. That means we're not going to put it in the calculator and round. We're going to put the answer in terms of sine and cosine. So if you look on the screen, you'll see what I wrote. My X is 300 cosine 315. Do you see that? And my Y is 300 sine 315.
Did you type in the brackets yourself too?
They were already there, so it's fine. You don't need brackets.
Oh, hers just looks different.
We can't like separate cosine and sin.
You can
Just
add
put a
solution.
comma or do add solution.
Okay.
and it should pop up your second box.
I
Okay,
wanna go-
So your x coordinate comes first, 300 cosine 315. And then 300 sine 315, then push enter, go to the next question, we're gonna do the wind. Okay? So it should look just like what I have on my screen.
Was the weather outside? It is.
Okay, for the wind, you're on the second question, which is 4B. Okay, how fast is the wind blowing?
40.
So 40 cosine something, 40 sine something. And then what direction is it blowing? North would be perfectly straight up. How many degrees would north be?
90.
That would be 90, that's right. So
Oh,
put a
you're so
90 here
smart.
and here. Then type it in. Or actually, maybe the next one's multiple choice.
Yeah.
But either way, you should be picking that.
Gross.
So which one are we picking? A, B, C, or D?
B.
Okay, B is 40 cosine 90 and sine, you know what I mean. Okay,
We know.
next one. It asks you to find the component vector of the wind and the plane. That means you're adding. So in your calculator, to make this easy, look up here. I want you to type in this plus this to get the component vector. And then I'm gonna do the y plus the y. If you want to find the numbers separately and then add them, that's fine. Okay, but I'm just gonna do them all together. So watch what I mean by that if you need help. You're doing 300 cosine 315 plus 40 cosine 90. All in one fell swoop right there. Okay? And then to be a little bit lazy, I'm gonna go up and pick that answer and I'm gonna change my cosines to sines. So that I don't have to type it all again. So my x coordinate came out to 212.1. My y coordinate is negative 172.1. So I'm gonna write that down over here for part C. So for part C, I added 212.1, negative 172.1. Okay, then you're gonna take that vector and you're gonna type it in as your answer. So 212.1 and then negative 172.1, just like that. Okay, after you add, do you remember what we always find next? It's in the same order every time.
Direct.
Not direction, not yet.
Oh, magnitude.
Magnitude. And how do we find magnitude for the next part? A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So let's go to the next question. Remember that in the problem, magnitude is the speed. Okay, so I'm gonna write it down here, then I'll put it in the calculator. Okay, magnitude is gonna be 212.1 squared. 212, oh, that's it. Okay, 212.1 squared plus 172.1 squared. Then square root it.
Wait, do you want the?
We're gonna do the actual value for this one. So I got root 74,604, which came out to about 273.1. And remember that that would be representative of how fast the plane is going with the wind against it. So even though the engine's trying to get it to go 300 with the wind, it's only gonna go 273. So type that answer in, 273.1. 273.1. And then the last two questions are about direction, but it's gonna have you put the reference angle first to check to see if it's right, and then your very last question will be direction. So for part E, how do I find the reference angle? I will need the quadrant for direction, but which of the trigs do I use? Sine, cosine, or tangent. And then remember tan, do I do inverse tan on x over y or y over x? And my y was 172.1, my x was 212.1. So tell me what your reference angle is. It should be rounded to the nearest whole decimal. I got 38.9, which is what? 39. Go ahead and type that in. And then for the last part, okay, actually, we didn't graph this one. But remember that last class, I would have had you draw the diagram. But even without drawing the diagram, how can I know what quadrant this would have been in? Positive and negative on the X and Y. So I would have gone which way, left or right? Right, and then up or down? Down. So if I go right and down, I end up in quadrant because I'd go to the right and down. So I'm in 360 minus, so I do 360 minus 49. You get it? All right, so then after lunch, if you want, the next question would be exactly the same steps. Is in
It's 321.
quadrant.
You just said
So we do 360.
We're gonna line you, stop. Melanie, stop, because you're saying, it ain't, that's how you.
Should be 321.
What should it be? He just, oh, okay, way to communicate,
People will.
You finna go to lunch.